Hello, Joseph. How are you? Can you hear me? Welcome, Rita. So welcome to today's session. As usual, we'll be talking about research or academics in general, how you're doing, how you're doing with your present assignments. If you have any questions, you just go ahead and ask, and then we can start. So I'm just waiting for your questions to start rolling in. Then we can start. Today's session will be for an hour, and then we'll call it a day. Joseph, that's a good question. All right. So, if you frame your research questions, um, if you frame your research questions properly, yes, you can easily convert them into a hypothesis. All right. So yes, there's a strong correct connection between the research question and the hypothesis. All right. So the idea is the hypothesis is well related to the question, so that when you're able to test the hypothesis in other ways, you are still answering the research question. So there's a connection between them, and if you write the research question properly, it should be easy for you to formulate hypothesis. No, they are not the same. One has to be tested. The hypothesis needs to be tested, but the research question just needs to be answered. But for the hypothesis, you need to test it. Any questions? Questions? I'm just waiting for questions. If you don't have a lot of questions today, which means everyone is good and we can just end the session early. I would really like if you please skin a little more light on what the research problem statement should entail or look like. All right. So it seems I'm getting this question a lot about the problem statement. Um, and I was wondering whether you got something from your leadership core when you did problem statement. What did you get, and what exactly is missing? What clarifications do you need? Right? Problem statement is usually structured in a way that you're supposed to give us the context to the problem. All right. Context means in which geographical space does it occur? In which field does it occur? What is the prevailing statistics with regards to that specific problem? The statistics can be on a national scale, then you come down to, how do you call it, continental scale. It can be from a global scale, then you come to continental scale, then regional, and then local, right? Which means you need to be able to know some statistics or numbers with regards to that particular problem in the area for which you want to conduct the research. So that's the, how do you call it, the first section of the problem. Then the second section is to answer the question: what will happen if you don't, tackle this research? All right. That is to say, what is the significance of this problem, so that when nothing is done about it, or when you don't conduct this research, what will be the implication for it? So you have to like organize that in that way. Give us the context for the problem. Tell us what will happen if the problem is not solved, and then now at the final section, tell us what exactly this research seeks to do in relation to the problem. So the last part of the problem statement actually now fleshes out what exactly that your research is going to focus on. What is the exact difference between alternative and hypothesis? It gets really confusing. What is confusing about it, Joel? Joel, can you be specific? What is confusing about it? Phrasing them. If you phrase the first hypothesis right, forget about null or alternate. If you phrase the first hypothesis right, the other one is just the opposite side of what will happen to the, how do you call it, the alternate, the null hypothesis. All right. So it's like stating something in the positive sense and then stating it again in the negative sense. So I use this as an example. The low production of maize in Bora City has enabled maize farmers not to meet my. That's not hypothesis, Joseph. Unless you're not speaking about hypothesis now. I considered low production of maize as independent variable and meeting market demands as dependent variable. Joseph, still, like I mentioned, and it goes the same for even for at the topic level, I would say this is very broad. So for a hypothesis, you have to narrow down to very detailed specifics, because this is for you to test a hypothesis, you need specific numbers assigned to each variable so that you can compare it to the other variable. That's the whole point. So if whatever you are mentioning, the two variables you are mentioning there, in terms of low cost of maize, low cost, what does that even mean? Can you quantify that? Can you collect data on that? All right. If you go down to details such as if you go to maize production, an area where it's largely maize production that they undertake, and you find out that, let's say, 5 acres of maize planted is supposed to generate, how do you call it, this number of bags of maize. All right. So you can run a hypothesis which is that for any number of acre of maize, this is the equivalent output you're supposed to get in terms of income. All right, which means when this person puts these acres of farm, how do you call it, plant these acres of maize, they are supposed to generate this amount of output, and then this is the amount of income they are supposed to make. So where there is a variation, that is when you say, okay, there is a significant factor here that is influencing the ability to get the same output from the same size of acres over a period of time. So in this case, you can be able to collect data in terms of like, what is the size of your land. So when we know the size of your land, we'll then ask you the question: how many bags of maize are you able to produce per year? They can give you data on that as well. So you can collect that same data from different people, and you can use that to generate. You can use that to test your hypothesis. We'll go through that in detail, or I'll share some more materials that will shed light on the concept of hypothesis. I considered low production of maize as independent variable, meeting market demands as dependent variable. So it's still at a very broad level. So if someone asks you the question, how are you going to collect data for low production of maize? All right. How are you going to quantify low production of maize? Yes, so it is comparing the relationship between two or more variables. So you can have dependent and independent, and those dependent and independent might be influenced by what is called, how do you call it, an intervening variable. All right. I think I need to share material with you on the types of variables, but we will still get into a lot more of that next semester. But still, we need to sit down and know what our hypotheses are and how we're going to collect data in order to test them next semester. So next semester, we'll be doing detailed workshops on SPSS data analysis and also using other software such as NVivo for data analysis. Hopefully, you'll be on campus and you can use the SPSS in the ICT rooms. Any other questions? Any other questions? Angelique, you want to understand well the evaluation type of research. More questions, guys? All right, let me answer Angelique's question. So, Angelique, evaluation research, the main goal of evaluation research is to assess the efficiency of something, right? So, maybe you started a project or a project is about to start and you want to conduct research and find out whether the time, money, and effort that will be put into this project is worth it. So that is when you conduct evaluation research. It basically comes from the word evaluate. To evaluate means to find out the worth, the efficiency, or whether something needs to be done or it needs to be cancelled. So that is usually done a lot on a lot of projects that want to find out whether whatever they've spent lots and lots of money on is actually worth it. Should they have done it or they should have cancelled it? The same also goes for projects that have already that are yet to begin. So, for example, before ALU is supposed to build 5 campuses across Africa, right? Right now we have 2. So, for example, let's say you want to find out whether it's worth it building the rest of the 3 campuses when we already have 2. We could just expand it to take everyone. But we want to build 5. So there's a lot of evaluation that has been done to actually determine that actually this is something that is worth it before we go ahead and implement. I hope that is clear. Joseph, so what if I say eating rice every day makes people get fat? That is also still very broad, Joseph, right? Which type of rice are we talking about? All right. What do you mean by every day? Every morning, every afternoon, every evening, or they are eating rice 24 hours a day? All right. So, and what quantity of rice are we talking about? Right? If you say people who weigh 50 kilograms, when they eat 500 grams of boiled rice, nothing else, because any other thing, meat and all those things also add up. If they eat 500 grams of boiled rice every morning, right? Every morning for breakfast, within 3 months, they would have gained 10 kg. So you see, I'm actually mentioning specific figures. So you can take people, the number of people who weigh 50 kg, lock them up in a room, and then all you feed them in every morning is 500 grams of rice. You weigh them. 500 grams of rice, you weigh them for those 2 months you mentioned, and then you can say, oh, so you tested it and realized, yes, it's true that people who eat rice, 500 grams of rice every morning for 2 months will gain an additional 10 kilograms of weight. You always have to be very, very specific with the hypothesis, because then you can be able to collect data. I can collect data on the weight of people. I can collect data on the weight of the rice, all right? I know which type of rice that is supposed to be used, the weight, and I said 2 months, so I have to measure them at the end of those 2 months and check and say, okay, you were 50 kg, and now how much weight have you added? All right, which means you are giving them no other food but those 500 grams of rice every morning for 2 months, and then they're going to gain this weight. So that is more precise, and you can collect all sorts of data that you mentioned in the hypothesis for the sake of comparison. Um, is it a must that I should include a hypothesis? It sounds like D&D. D&D wasn't something you did and then you're done. D&D, no. Whatever you went through in leadership core, they are tools that are given you so that you can be able to use throughout the rest of your years at area. So all the things that you learned, don't throw them away. You're supposed to use them. It sounds D&D that you have to do it. The idea of them teaching you is so that when you get to second year, I don't have to make a lot of effort repeating the same thing. So you've done it. Hypothesis is not a must for every research that you conduct. Right? Hypothesis is not a must for every research you conduct, but at the same time, if it is something that will actually give your research that power of influence, then please, you need to put it in there and be able to test it. If you're willing to learn, then get on it and include that in your research. I hope I answered your question, Rita. Any other question? All right. So Joseph, so that's a good start, right? That's a good start, and that is something that you can actually implement. So I don't know whose children under the age of 5 you're going to put them. So there is something that is called control experiment, right? Control experiment is when you put people in or plants or things in an environment where you can manipulate their variables. So for you, don't do this, but for you to carry out this research, you need children under the age of 5, and you keep them in one building, and you give them 1 liter of water every morning. All right, and then check their weight over a period of time before you can be able to say, oh yeah, so that 1 liter of weight actually impacts their weight. All right, so in a control experiment, I don't know whether you've come across this word placebo. All right, so you have 5 kids that you are going to be giving water to every morning. And then you have another 5 kids that you will not give any water to, right? They will just live their days regular. Then at the end of a period of time that you're also supposed to state in the hypothesis, you are checking their weight, and then you see that, okay, those who drank water, their weight increased to this extent. And those who did not drink 1 liter of water every morning, their weights are up to this. Then you can be able to use that to make a conclusion. Yes, but Joseph, please don't try this your hypothesis on anybody's children. Nobody will allow that, and I'm not sure the ethics committee will approve that. So that is getting more and more specific. All right. So also for the hypothesis, you eventually going to have to state conditions for it. You said we should try to be innovative with. What do you encourage we do when there's little data on our research topic? Depends on the topic. Which topic do you have in mind that has little data? Oh, Joseph, I understand. Josephine, yes, tell me, what is this topic that you have that has little or no data? I'll be excited to hear about that one. Because I know there's a lot of data out there to conduct different types of research. So if yours there is no data at all, that will be interesting. I would love to hear about that. It's still in the pipeline. Please don't choke the pipeline. Let it out. I hope you guys are reading the materials. It's not every research that you need a hypothesis, right? But a hypothesis, if you have any, adds to the preciseness and accuracy and ease of actually collecting data. Because when you have a research question that is too broad, then you have to collect data on so many levels in attempt to be able to answer the question. But if it's very specific and narrow enough, it makes it easy for you to collect specific kinds of data and easy for you to also write your methodology section. Joseph, that's a question. That's a question, not a topic. So for research topic, avoid asking questions. It's a statement that you can clearly identify the dependent and independent variables. All right, so if there are no further questions, we can end today's session. If there are no further questions, we can end today's session. All right, so unless there's any question in the next 15 seconds, I'll bring this session to an end and we'll have the next one next week. Yes, they are office hours, Rita. You can always just send me a message, or you can book a calendar one-on-one session with me, and then we'll talk. I'm always available for one-on-one sessions. Just send me a message on Hangouts or book a one-on-one session on my calendar, and then I'll make time and talk to you. All right, guys. Thank you very much for joining the stream. And if you want to have one-on-one sessions, like I mentioned, book it on my calendar or send me a message on Hangouts. If you have any questions, that is a quick one. You can still send me a message on Hangouts or WhatsApp, and I'll quickly respond. And I'll see you in our next class session. It should not consist. I gave you that table, Joseph, so that you can use it to narrow the topic down. Because there's a tendency that you want to like solve, a huge problem. So your topic is too broad. So I gave you that table about who, what, where, and when, so that it can help you to narrow down your topic into a very tiny specific. All right. So it's not meant to have that answer to all those questions in the title. All right. Thank you. And I'll see you in the next class session. Have an awesome evening.